I don't know what the facility will look like. Maybe the government passes some congressional bill that says, hey guys, here's $3 trillion to support, all this real estate. Here's another, $2 trillion to support banks and, giving them liquidity. Because the other problem, as you guys know, is most of the population in the US has most of their assets, their asset value or their equity value in their home. And those home prices are supported by residential loan programs. And, if you actually have a massive write down of the value of that asset class, that's when, everything kind of falls apart. So, we will continue to be buoyed by that kind of inflationary behavior. Unfortunately, Balaji, I think, has it right. We'll talk about his bet in a minute, that there has to be money printing to get out of this hole. I don't know if it's necessarily in this moment hyperinflationary, as he predicts. He uses the Deutschmark in the Weimar Republic as this kind of storyline that this is what's about to happen in the US. The truth is, it looks a little bit more like the pound sterling at the end of the British Empire, where, there's certainly an inflationary and devaluation effect that arises, but it is the reserve currency of the world today. And so it's really hard to kind of just say, hey, it's going to be hyperinflationary and the value is going to go to zero. It's just not going to happen.
So that seems to be the bet.
Of the dollar.
Yeah. So that seems to be the bet now, Chamath, that some folks are predicting, catastrophizing, hey, this is the end of U.S. supremacy, the end of the dollar. Of course, modern monetary theory seems to state you can just keep printing dollars and make a couple $1 trillion coins and backstop it. And by the way, TARP was profitable modestly for the United States, and the backstop of real estate totally worked. So where do you land on this? Do you think these backstops and modern monetary theory stating that you can just print money, you own your own fiat currency, is going to work? Or as we pivot to the $1 million Balaji Bitcoin bet, that this is the end of days?
I think it's not the end of days, but I think you're conflating a bunch of things together. So look, MMT.
Yes, I am. Yes.
Was in hindsight idiotic. In the moment, it never quite made sense, but in hindsight, it's clearly idiotic. And I think that we can properly dispense with that. But the reason that we print so much money is sort of what Friedberg says, which is that we just want a well-functioning society. And the simplest and shortest way to do that is to make sure that there aren't any winners and losers anymore. And the most effective way to do that in the markets is with money. Print a bunch of money and there are no more winners and losers. And so everybody can kind of win. Some people may win more, but nobody really ever loses. So I think that's the MO that we're operating under. The thing is, I don't think that...
There's something unhealthy to that, Chamath. You're sort of alluding to no losers.
That's a more philosophical and a commentary on capitalism and a bunch of other things. And you're right. I don't think it makes sense. I do think you need winners and losers to really make society function well. But the other part of it is like, does it reinforce or does it decay US dollar hegemony? And I think it actually reinforces it. And the reason is just very practically speaking, when you look at how dependent other people, other countries are on the US dollar, in times of stress, they actually become more dependent. And that has a lot to do with their borrowing patterns, the amount of dollars central banks need outside the United States. And so what did you see in a moment of stress? Actually, the Fed opened up swap lines to all the central banks that they work with, their most important operating partners, so Europe, Canada, Japan, etc., Switzerland. And they moved the liquidity window from weekly to daily, and they pounded the swap lines. So I don't know. I think that most people that kind of like, it's like a boy crying wolf. Maybe at some point somebody will be right, but you're going to lose so much money trying to take a point of view around this topic that it's more practical to just look at dollar flows. And dollar flows go up in moments of stress, not go down. And they go up in a distributed manner across the monetary plumbing of the world.
All right, so let's explain the Balaji bet, since that trended, and he is the boy who, as you're saying, cried wolf this past week.
Cried Bitcoin.
Yeah, the boy cried Bitcoin. Very well said. So a friend of the pod, Balaji, on March 17th, predicted that Bitcoin will reach $1 million in 90 days due to U.S. hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is defined as prices going up 50% month over month, just so we're clear on exactly how dramatic that is. He made the bet on March 17th against a pseudonymous Twitter user, James Medlock, who said they would bet 1 million that the U.S. would not experience hyperinflation. So Balaji sort of inserted Bitcoin into that bet. It wasn't a Bitcoin bet then. And I think he's done 2 of these bets. So he's betting 2 million in total on Bitcoin hitting 1 million by June 17th, which there's probably no chance of that happening, or a very tiny chance. I'll ask the panel in a second. Bitcoin was trading at 26,000 at the time. It's now trading at over 28,000. And Balaji has been on every podcast known to man in the last 72 hours talking about this. I've watched 1 or 2 of them. And it's a pretty out there argument, I think. You can just type in Balaji on YouTube and watch any of the 20 he's done. He believes regional banks are insolvent. He thinks the Fed is going to need to print a massive amount of money, like we've said here, do more QE, and then cut rates. It all seems reasonable. But that will lead to hyperinflation.
It's not reasonable.
Well, no, it's not that it's reasonable. That we just printed that they're going to cut rates. We just discussed they're going to eventually cut rates, and there'll be more QE. So that part is reasonable. Just that one little piece. But then he believes is the part that is kind of out there, that hyperinflation is going to devalue the dollar, and this is the time. He does not, and I made a bunch of. I asked him this a bunch of times, and he would not be honest about it, or didn't want to answer my question. I said, hey, what percentage are you in Bitcoin? Somebody says he's 99% in Bitcoin. He will not confirm. And so I was like, well, if you own 1,000 Bitcoins, if this goes up, a very small amount, 4 or 5%, you're going to pay for the bets. And are you talking your own book here or not? Sachs, what do you think of this overall bet? Is it a stunt?
Yeah.
He's saying like this is the lifeboats moment. And just to add to it, he says you have to leave the United States and get to Singapore or a place, or if you're going to stay in the United States, you need to get to Wyoming or Texas or somewhere that explicitly allows Bitcoin, because the closer you are to the United States banking system, what happened to Silicon Valley Bank on that fateful weekend where people couldn't get their cash and we're going to have to, miss payroll? He says that's the dry run for the entire U.S. banking system. Sachs.
So first of all, I don't think you can disparage Balaji, because someone who cries wolf says this repeatedly and makes a dire prediction repeatedly and is wrong. And we can't say yet that Balaji is wrong. Do I think that we're going to have $1 million Bitcoin in 90 days? I personally find that very unlikely, but you can't say yet. He stuck his neck out making a prediction that will be easily falsified if he's wrong. Second, the last time that Balaji made a dire prediction was COVID. And he was right about
that one.
So you can't say that this is just like a doomer who throws out crazy predictions and is always wrong. He's actually pretty selective about his